Here.
Kirk Martin,
Here.
Craig Arcuri,
Here.
Patricia Griffin,
Here.
Carl Hopkins,
Here.
Karen Kahn,
Here.
Jim Wilson.
All right, thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission. 2 minutes. Any speaker slips?
I
Any
have no speaker
speakers?
slips. No.
All right, thank you. Notices on Wednesday, September 10th at 9:15 a.m. The Lease Review Subcommittee met in the Airport Administration Conference Room. On Wednesday, September 24th at 6 p.m., Airport and Fire and Police Commissions held a special meeting in Airport Administration. And on Thursday, October 9th, 2014, 5:30 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda at the Airport Administration Building. And minutes, you should have all received. Do we have a motion to approve, having waived the reading?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor accepting minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Minutes approved. Consent calendar, any changes? We have one item, the property management report. Any changes to the... We have a change? No? Okay, no changes to the consent calendar.
Move we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving consent, the property management report?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approved, thank you. And liaison reports. Looks like we have them both today. From the City of Santa Barbara, our liaison, Frank Hotchkiss. Thanks for joining us.
Beautiful.
It's nice to be here. Thank you. Central report is that our goal, I think, as I told you last time, was to conserve 20% water, and we conserved 26%. So hats off to the populace. Going to make it tougher to get any more, but we will try. The city council's now in discussions about how we should handle new development. It turns out that new development, should we stop, it saves us very little water. So the argument is, let's not halt the economy for the sake of saving pennies or being penny wise but pound foolish. That will be coming up again in, I think, a month for more ample discussion. That's my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, and no report from our City of Goleta liaison.
Oh.
Questions for the City Goleta liaison? All right. Commission matters. We have an item on here. The semi-annual meeting of advisory boards and commissions was held on September 29th. Now, I did attend, but neglected to bring my notes with me this evening to give you all a report on that. It was very interesting. It was hosted at the harbor, and a very nice report by the harbor administrator there. A lot of work going on there. They, like the airport, have a lot of ongoing maintenance, and one of their big projects is redoing the docks. You know, they kind of have to do that on a rolling basis. So that's underway. And I'm afraid I can't think of too many other major items right off the top of my head. If I bring my notes next time, I can update you all. As always, that's a very informative meeting. So, all right. Item 8, the revised minimum standards, which we have a presentation on. This was the product of how many meetings did we have? 6, I think.
That's right.
Felt like more than that.
This is a big accomplishment, and hats off to the committee members who spent hours working with us and to update our standards. And tonight, Tom Billers, our administrative analyst, who was leading the charge on this project, will make the presentation. Tom?
Good evening. We're going to talk briefly about what minimum standards are and kind of the process we went through to update them. What are minimum standards? They are the baseline standards that any commercial service provider has to meet to provide services at the airport. In exchange for that opportunity, they have to meet certain qualifications for personnel, facility requirements, and the services that they provide. Some of the benefits: it promotes safety, protects airport users, enhances the availability of services, and promotes the orderly development of the airport. And just on those airport users, it's not only the public, it's also other service providers in the airport itself. Really, everybody who uses the airport benefits by people meeting these minimum standards. An airport sponsor that accepts federal grants has to meet certain obligations. Among those obligations are a prohibition on granting exclusive rights and also a prohibition against economic discrimination. The FAA encourages the development of minimum standards as a means for the airport to not violate these grant assurances by applying the minimum standards equally to similarly situated service providers. The airport can avoid violating these grant assurances. The FAA also encourages that these be reviewed periodically as changes in the aviation world occur. The airport originally developed these in 1998, and they were subsequently updated in 2006. For the current update, we looked at other airports' minimum standards, FAA advisory circulars, and other regulations, and publications across the aviation industry. The airport also formed a committee of airport stakeholders to meet and discuss the revised minimum standards, and these included representatives from the FBOs, fuel service providers, and 3 airport commissioners. As Bruce alluded to earlier, there were a number of meetings with some lively discussions.
Quite.
So into the sort of nitty-gritty of what changed from the previous version. Article 1 is the introduction. We talked a little bit about the benefits of the minimum standards. We included those in the updated version. There's a new section on who the minimum standards apply to. For example, they don't apply to a non-aeronautical service provider like a rental car company, the airport itself, etc. Service providers must meet all federal, state, city laws, regulations, etc. Seems like a no-brainer. In the airport, the minimum standards are meant to be consistent with all other laws, rules, etc. And we included a severability clause in there in case a portion of it is found not to be consistent with those laws. The definitions article, a few new definitions were added. Aeronautical activity relates to the fact that the minimum standards cover flight schools, which aren't a commercial activity, and a few other non-commercial activities. California Fire Code and Code of Federal Regulations just refer to those specific documents. We made some changes to commercial operator to clarify what commercial meant, and for the fixed base operators to tie their definition specifically to the article on fixed base operators. And then any definitions that weren't referenced elsewhere in the document we got rid of. All commercial aeronautical service providers, we added some new requirements into the minimum standards to meet security and environmental regulations, that they need to conduct their business in a professional, safe manner, exercise some management control, not interfere with utilities, navigation aids. We also updated the insurance requirements. The previous version listed some more specific requirements, and this ties it to the lease or agreement that the service provider is operating under. And we also added a section on reasons for disapproving an application. The previous version just gave the director the authority to approve or disapprove an application, but didn't specify exactly why that might be. Article 5 on the fixed base operators. In the draft master plan, there's a section on the FBOs and helicopter parking, so we included that in the minimum standards. And there's also a section on specific aviation line services, such as ground equipment. The FBOs may subcontract their maintenance and specific aviation line services requirements, but they may not subcontract their fuel or aircraft storage requirements. Aircraft fuels operator, the fire department requested that we include some additional language that the fuels operators meet California Fire Code and apply for a fire permit. And we also require the FBOs who provide fuel and the self-service operators to have a fixed fuel storage facility and place some limits on the size of the fuel storage facilities for self-fueling and self-service fuelers. Article 7 and Article 8, these two are related. There was a lot of lively discussion at our committee meetings about these requirements. In the old document, we refer to mobile service providers. That was updated to independent operator, which is the term that the FAA uses. We also eliminated the ability for a maintenance provider to be an independent operator. One of the major issues related to the maintenance was that some of the operators on the field wanted to be able to bring in maintenance operators on an ad hoc basis. So, for example, if you bought a plane and you had warranty work that needed to be done and that was included in your purchase, then they can come on the field. And we tied that responsibility specifically to the specialized aviation service operator so that they're responsible for those third-party operators that do come onto the airport. So, in conclusion, at the last meeting on September 30th, the Minimum Standards Committee recommended that the Airport Commission approve the revised minimum standards.
All right, well, thank you for that presentation. Yeah, I'd say it was a very productive, highly collaborative, very positive experience and project, and I really wanted to thank the stakeholders who participated in it. We have several of them here, and we have Commissioner Arcuri and Commissioner Hopkins were on there, but I especially wanted to thank airport staff for all the work that went into it. In other words, we were continually identifying issues that required a lot of research, and there was a lot of work done going out and finding out what other airports were done, and I can't thank you enough for hosting all of that and making all that collaboration happen. So I'm sure there's questions.
Question. When was the last time it was updated? And
2006.
so is this on a certain schedule that it be updated or just as needed?
We wanted to update the minimum standards so that they would be current when we did the request for proposals for the fixed base operators as a part of the master plan implementation. Rebecca has put together the foundation for the RFP, but this was a critical element so that everyone would know what the playing field was like. So this was really a big achievement towards that goal of doing the RFP.
But there isn't we don't have a fixed schedule at every
No.
5 years or 10 years. It's
I don't
as
think
needed.
so. No, I think it's
Just periodically.
as things change on the field or as FAA makes changes with advisory circulars, which they do periodically, but there isn't a set schedule for us to do it. Mm-hmm.
I know we have several members of the stakeholders. Let me just ask if there's any public comment. Anybody would like to share? All right. Okay, great. Well, any further questions? I imagine you've all had a chance to read it front to back.
Well, it looks like a thorough vetting was done.
There was vigorous
A
discussion.
lot of work went into this. So
Vigorous vetting.
I appreciate the end product. And if there's
done.
no other discussion, I would move for approval.
Second?
We are,
All right.
yeah.
Excellent. All in favor of approving the minimum standards as revised?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you again. Quite an achievement. It was a large document. All right. And then brings us to item 9, and it probably should make notice that this afternoon at 4:30 p.m., the Budget Subcommittee did convene and did discuss the capital improvement program, which we are about to receive a presentation on.
That's correct. This, the capital improvement program is a plan, and it covers 2016 to 2021. Andrew Vermont, our airport planner, will do the presentation to provide you an overview of the projects that are listed in that plan. Andrew?
Thank you, Commissioners and Hazel. I'll just head right into it. I'll talk first about what the capital improvement program is, and then I'll talk about how the airport department addresses the capital improvement program, and then I'll get into the projects that are funded for the first 2 years that will be part of next year's biennial city budget. And then we'll also discuss a little bit the outer year projects, which are currently unfunded. So the capital improvement program is required by the Santa Barbara City Charter to provide a general summary of the capital improvements that are needed in the city of Santa Barbara in the next 5 years. We're supposed to provide cost estimates and include the estimated annual cost of operating and maintaining whatever the improvements are. This is the way we currently do it, because we have a 2-year budget, is we do a 6-year plan so that we're meeting that obligation for both years. The first 2 years are budget ready, so to speak, in that they will be included in the fiscal year 16-17 city budget. And then the outer years are unmet, unfunded needs that they need to be addressed, but it's not as pressing. So look at that! I didn't realize it did this. I'm sorry. Here's the schedule for the CIP. We're meeting today, and then we'll prepare the CIP with the Public Works Department is taking the lead on that. They will review the combined CIP for all of the departments and take that to Planning Commission in January. It goes to the City Council Finance Committee in February, and then to City Council in March. And this is to inform the City Council so that they can make their annual or biennial budget decision in June. The way the airport department addresses the CIP is we focus on the first 2 years, and we use the outer years as a wish list, let's say, of projects that are perhaps less defined. They're more in concept. We also divide the CIP between projects that are eligible for FAA Airport Improvement Program funding and those which would be entirely funded by the Airport Capital Fund. The total cost of all of these things, if we were to complete the entire 6-year CIP, is $47.2 million, which is really, I think, quite a large amount of money. The majority of that is actually spent in the AIP projects, which are federally funded. And I'll start with those. Here is a matrix that shows all of the projects in the years in which they're proposed to occur and their estimated costs. I'll go through the first ones in detail. The outer year ones, security system upgrade, the taxiway H extension, the RPZ acquisition parcel, and taxiway A rehab, those are all outer year projects that are concepts at this point, and we'll just kind of discuss those as you wish.
The first one for fiscal year 16 is a $1.2 million project to relocate the entrances at taxiways Echo and Kilo and widen taxiway Echo to 75 feet. This is in response to an FAA engineering briefing that says that entrances onto an airfield that goes straight onto a runway without requiring a turn should be discouraged. So this is a safety improvement because it will require pilots to make an extra turn before they can get onto a runway. The General Aviation pavement replacement is a multi-year project where we would be replacing, completely removing and putting in brand new pavement in the places where our pavement is the most distressed. And that's an ongoing project, really, because as we go along, our pavement continues to get older. So we're proposing $1 million in fiscal year 16, another in fiscal year 18. We are also proposing 2 new airfield rescue and firefighting trucks, ARF vehicles. Those are both $800,000 each. They're very expensive pieces of equipment, but our current ones are approaching their 15-year useful life, and so we'd be looking at replacing those. Additionally, there's the continued hazard that is presented by the Goleta Slough mouth being unmanaged and allowed to remain closed, and for the sediment and sand to build up there. That presents both a flooding risk and an increased wildlife attractant seasonally as high water levels and migratory waterfowl combine to present a wildlife strike hazard. At the moment, this isn't much of an issue because of the drought, so this may be the only good news in the drought. But we would look to address this in the next year so that we can have a strategy going forward to mitigate those risks.
Andrew, you might explain what's in the dollar amounts in parentheses.
I should explain the dollar amounts in parentheses. Thank you, Hazel. The dollar amount is the cost of the project, and then I've put in parentheses the airport portion. AIP grant projects are funded 90.66% by the FAA, and then 9.34% local match. So these projects are really a good deal for the airport. Then we're also looking at the runway 725 overlay in fiscal year 17. That's a $2.8 million project, which would only cost about $250,000 of the airport capital fund. That's to grind, pave, groove, and remark the entire main instrument runway, mostly overnight work. And then our outer year projects, I discussed those briefly. These are in concept. Most of them are included in the airport master plan, and these are sort of next steps in implementing the airport master plan. And I'll move on now to the non-federal projects. There's a bit more of these, but they're of a smaller financial scale generally. That's not true of the first one. This is a light industrial park development that would be along the Hollister frontage between Lopez and David Love Place. The proposal is to construct 6 light industrial buildings totaling 60,000 square feet. This would cost about $9.2 million to construct over several years. The next item on the list is leased building maintenance. The airport has contracts with the tenants, these lease agreements that obligate the airport to maintain the buildings in a certain condition, and so this is a funding category to meet that obligation. More specifically, we have the buildings at 1440 and 1520 Cook Place, occupied by L3 Marlboro. We'd be replacing the facade and doing some landscape work in the next fiscal year.
Drought tolerant?
Drought tolerant landscaping, of course. We also have in the CIPs the street program, which is an ongoing annual program to maintain the streets that are operated and maintained by the airport, such as Firestone, Cook, Arnold. These are all not part of the city's network. They are airport streets, so we need to maintain those. I also have airport operations area pavement maintenance. This is similar to the general aviation maintenance or rehab in the federal program, but smaller scale. These are crack sealing and remarking on a smaller scale pavement that is currently serviceable that we don't need to pull out and replace, but we do need to maintain. Then we also have the airport utility infrastructure. This is our storm drains, our sewer system, our water lines, electrical lines. These all require maintenance as needed, so about $50,000 per year is scheduled in the CIP. And then for our out-of-year projects, we have a number of, I think, nice-to-have items that would be funded if funding were available. They include the airline equipment maintenance facility, addressing some of the drainage issues on Hollister Avenue, installing the Gate 3 boarding bridge is, sort of completing the airline terminal project. If we have a need for such a thing, this would be a very good project to include. Adding the hearing loop system for the airline terminal so that people using hearing aids will have an easier time hearing the announcements. The maintenance and restoration of the General Western Aero hangars, which are the two oldest hangars on the airfield over in the northeast corner. These are all unfunded in the CIP. They're not proposed to be part of the budget, but they're listed to demonstrate some of the airport's unmet needs. So that's the CIP. I'll be happy to discuss any of the items in more detail or answer questions you might have. Thanks.
When we gain new fire equipment, new engines, and that sort of thing, what do we do with the old ones?
They are sold as they're surplus, so they're sold on to another entity.
Craigslist.
No.
Used fire engine lot?
Yes, perhaps something like Craigslist.
They usually end up down in South or Central America.
Yeah. Our last ones went to Mexico.
Any other questions? Right. Excellent presentation. Clearly, since there were no questions, you must have answered everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That brings us to item 10, a lease agreement with the United States Department of Commerce National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Yes, Rebecca will be, Ms. Fribley will make this presentation because there is development associated with this proposed lease agreement. I've asked her to provide some background information for you on that one. Rebecca?
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, more fondly referred to as NOAA, operates atmospheric research observatories along the west coast of the United States. They have been a tenant here in previous years, and they study the coastal and ocean ecosystems and the predictability of coastal weather. They've been here off and on since 1996. Most recently, they were relocated to San Nicolas Island in 2004, but the salt spray and the unpredictability of the ocean made it difficult for them to service the equipment and shortened the life of their products. So they wished at this time to come back to Santa Barbara and establish a new observatory. The proposed lease terms are a 10-year term in an aviation facilities zone. The parcel itself is located, for those of you that are familiar with the old Forest Service ramp, down in the area right near where the Butler building used to be. They're looking at 2,500 square feet of land. The rental rate would be 12.5 cents per square foot for a total rental of $312.50 per month, which is comparable to other aviation facilities land rentals on the airport. So this gives you an overview of the actual meteorological monitoring site. And as a point of reference, on the right side of the slide is Hangar 1, and the little rectangle there on the ramp is the self-fueling facility. What they're actually going to be constructing is a 449 megahertz wind profiler. And for those of you who remember when they were here the last time, that was located past the area where Hunot Retardant had their tanks. And it periodically sends up a ping. If you were in that area, it's a very interesting thing, but the sound waves actually carry up into the atmosphere and then come back down and collect information for them. So the equipment actually is going to be consisting of an 8x12 equipment shelter, the wind profiler with radio acoustic sounding system, and a 10-foot meteorological tower and a backup propane generator. And this is a side view of what the entire installation will look like. You can see the little housing for the actual computers and equipment, and it's a side view of the wind profiler. So I'm asking that Airport Commission recommend approval of the 10-year lease agreement with the United States Department of Commerce, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, say that 5 times fast, this evening. Does anyone have any questions?
You indicated there was some development necessary for this, and I'm unaware of what that would cost.
The development costs would be borne by NOAA.
Okay.
They're building it.
They're going to be, the development is, we're actually giving them a piece of ground just past the tanks for the self-service fueling facility. They're going to come in, they're going to do all the grading, they're going to construct their equipment and all of the facilities, and then all of the costs for that, plus the utilities cost as an ongoing issue, will all be borne by NOAA.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go back to the chart that showed where it was?
Yeah. So Hangar 1 is there on the right side of the screen, and you can see the self-fueling tank. And then the lease site itself is in the white, and the wind profiler is the actual blue area. So it's not a huge, huge piece of equipment, but the entire site will be the 2,500 square feet.
I'm just curious as to why there as opposed to moving it a little bit sort of up and to the left. That area there sort of used to have asphalt on it, and now is mostly weeds and was fenced in where the fire, and yet this looks like it encroaches or partway onto the concrete, partway onto the parking, and then leaves a pretty much unusable chunk of asphalt there.
Well, Andrew could answer that, but I can tell you it's because there's a creek right behind there, and we have to maintain a certain distance from the creek bank.
Okay.
So, and we also didn't want to put it in the area that we had it in before, because then it would have interfered with the development of Taxiway Hotel extension. So our footprint to put it in, we actually did quite a bit of research into where exactly we could locate this thing where it would not be in the way and not need to be relocated at some point during the term of the lease. And this was the optimum site that we came up with.
Mm-hmm. And I believe in the master plan that area had been considered for transient parking?
I don't believe this exact area. I think it was further to the west for transient parking, because there's very little usable area once Taxiway Hotel goes through from the corner of Hangar 1 out to the end of the runway. It's a very, very narrow little triangle.
And that asphalt area, you say, is too close to the creek that runs through there for any new development?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So question, is this manned? Will there be people there monitoring?
Most of the monitoring is done from off-site via computer, and they do come periodically and check their equipment, but they won't have somebody actually stationed in this location.
Okay. Thank you.
You mentioned the interesting noise. Can you describe that in a little bit more detail?
Well, other than describing it as a ping, I don't know how to. It's a little bit like the noise that you hear when you watch a movie that features submarines. I guess that's about as close as I can get to
Like a
describing it. It's not audible from very far away. I mean, you have to literally be standing
That was my
within
question.
5 or
So
10 feet of the
for
thing
the
to
few
hear
tenants
it.
that are in the vicinity there,
Yeah. I would be extremely surprised if they heard it at all.
And will that leasehold require relocating the fence there? And it looks like it's already over the fence line.
Yes.
Yes,
So
we will be relocating the fence.
And some of the shrubs go down. It will be cleaning up that area somewhat once this installation goes in.
And there's no impact on accessibility for the self-serve for
No.
the fueling the tank or anything? Any other questions? Well, we have a recommendation to approve and authorize the airport director to execute the 10-year lease. Do we have a motion?
I move for recommendation.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor of approving the lease?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you for the presentation.
Good.
Approved. All right. And that brings us to the director's report.
It's a short report this evening. First, under air service, as you have read and heard, Frontier Airlines will be withdrawing their service, which currently is 4 days a week here in Santa Barbara, effective January 6th. They have indicated that they would bring it back between May and October as a seasonal service. That's not guaranteed, but that's the most recent information that we have. You'll also notice on our passenger count that we are down again, and that's disheartening, but that's what we have. I'd call your attention to the annual recruitment for city advisory groups. Interviews for positions by council begin Tuesday, October 21st. It's also on the 28th and on November 11th. And then council would make appointments on Tuesday, December 9, just so you'll know. Master plan. Earlier during Andrew's presentation, talking about the two historic two historic hangars. As part of the master plan environmental document, we have a historic structures report, which will be presented first to the Airport Master Plan Committee and then come forward to Airport Commission. That report and the requirements of that report will necessitate some changes to the alternatives that were presented in the initial master plan, because the historic report would like certain hangars to be maintained as opposed to demolished. So we'll have more on that in the near future. And that concludes my report. If you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions on the director's report? Well, with that then, thank you very much. We are adjourned.